Just cleaning my glasses. Good evening. I'm Dr. Imani Ma'at, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Progressively. Oh, Lord, that was horrible. They look worse now. Progressively Yours Health and Wellness Podcast. We're excited about the show tonight, like we always are. And I don't know what was on this. And my co-host, we're actually going to hear a little bit about his work, J. Bernard Kynes. We're going to hear a little bit about his work this evening as a psychotherapist working primarily with the African American community. And I'm excited because he's really passionate about his work, and I think that you'll understand why. So, but before we get started, I'm going to play his role, which is to open us up sort of spiritually. And it's probably good that I can't see myself without my glasses. See myself a little bit. But anyway, what we will do, as we always do, is just kind of center ourselves, balance ourselves, think about the good things that happened in your life today. Forget about the troubles, forget about the problems, and just relax. So I'd like you to take, if you want to, 3 deep breaths. Just inhale and exhale. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Ooh, I feel better. I'm glad I did that. Now I'm supposed to read something, and I really can't do that without my glasses. Come on. Whatever. Okay, it's all good. Thank you. That's so much better. All right. So, what I would like to do is read from our dear sister Amakiasu, who was on the show with us some months ago. Her book is Buried Treasure: Unearth Your Golden Soul. And so I picked this up and I was just kind of randomly looking through it. And I found something that resonated with me and wanted to share it with you. And the subject is judgment. And she says, judgment is a burden. Free yourself, let it go. Our well-meaning thoughts, sometimes held in self-righteousness, often place us in our very own self-constructed prison. Being mad at this one or that one creates walls and blockages. Who are you holding hostage due to some infraction against you or your loved one? Who are you looking down upon? And towards whom do you have an unfavorable fixed opinion? Even the slightest judgment can create toxicity in the spirit, like the flash of resentment towards that driver who cut in front of you on the freeway, and the choice words you muttered in the privacy of your own car. Pent-up anger, long-standing or otherwise, can cause these hot flashes throughout the day. They are indicators of our inner climate. Be at peace and do all you can to free yourself of the judging game. Takes a lot of energy and drags us down. The judging game. It takes a lot of energy and drags us down. If you have unfinished business with someone, consider having a constructive, non-accusatory conversation to clear the air. That's for the 1%. You might need a neutral mediator. Free the other 99% without a conversation. Just let them go. You'll feel lighter. You might even sprout wings. I love that. Thank you, Sister Amakiasu. Get a copy of Buried Treasure. This is really a wonderful, wonderful book. And so with that, I am going to introduce my co-host, who many of you know really well by now. Mr. J. Bernard Kynes Sr. And so I wrote down some things for him and about him. He's a psychotherapist. Where's your bio, babe? He doesn't know where his bio is. I don't either. So I'll just have to say he's a psychotherapist. He can talk about his certifications better than I can, but he's been working with the African American community and others for many, many years. It's his passion, and he's a avid reader of some of the great minds who talk about what happens inside of us, the thinking, the doing, the being. So I'm always love conversations with him, and I think you'll enjoy. He's going to share something from a piece that he wrote actually back in 2020 called "I Am Ahmad Arbury," and we're going to talk about psychotherapy in the African American community, specifically from an African male point of view, and all of the things that he sees and deals with on a daily basis. So with that, I'm going to have my co-host and fiance come and join us. Hey, Bernard.
Hey, Imani. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm feeling good about myself today. Thank you for asking.
Good. I'm glad. Let's see if we can get either closer so that the audience can see both of us. Is
Okay,
that good?
let's push that back so we can have some space where we can be kind
Show
of
the
loose.
room.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. That works. So I'm going to use your first question. Tell our audience a little bit about you and your history and your life as a child, through maybe the age of 12, that had some impact on who you are and your career choice and how you deal with people on a daily basis.
Thank you for the question, and good evening to the audience. And first, I want to thank you for the idea. She indicated that we need to take a show to talk about ourselves. I'm more of the introverted one, the quiet one, and I don't. So in sessions, I don't do a lot of talking, and so I when she came up with the idea that we needed to spend some time talking about ourselves, what we do, who we are. I agree, and so I'm delighted to have the opportunity to share with you. My own personal therapist, who watches our show, indicated that I needed to do the same, and let you all know a little bit more about my vocation. So to your question, so thank you. I know you had to go take care. We have 2 dogs here, and they wait till we get on the air sometimes to act out.
One of them was raiding the dog food, so that wasn't good.
Yeah.
Even though she's eating this evening.
Yeah. So to your question, interesting question. First, I always tell this story. So about my beginnings, I was conceived somewhere between Orlando and Tallahassee. I was born in the Bronx, New York, in Women's Hospital. And I grew up and was reared in Cordele, Georgia. I'm an adopted child. And when I had first awareness of my being, I remember my experience with Miss Van Hine. Miss Van Hine, who is an ancestor now, I think from an experience I had with her at the age of 4, is an inspiration to that is a part of who I am today. And that story was when Mama Kynes, who reared me, was taking me to a nursery because she had to work for Mr. Bridges. He would bring clothes for her to wash, iron, so forth and so on. I didn't want to be separated from her. So I experienced this early anxiety attack and separation anxiety. And I remember I was crying and begging her not to leave me. Well, we lived in a segregated community. The whites lived on one side of the railroad tracks, and we lived on the other side. And Ms. Venheim was the first white person that I met. She was Presbyterian. The Presbyterian church in the community had a school where our people could attend. They had a daycare center for the community. And so we went to Gillespie Seldon Institute Daycare Center. Well, I didn't want to be separated from mom, and I started crying. And Ms. Venheim got down on her knees, or it appears on her knees, but I know she got face level with me. And she looked in my eyes and she said very compassionately, "You're going to be all right. You can come on in and just play with the other children. You're going to be fine." And she was in my face, and it was the tone of her voice that was so soothing. And I had coins in my hand, 3 to be exact. And she instructed me. She said, "Now give them back to her." And I gave her 1. She said, "Give her the other." I gave it to her. She said, "Give her the other one." So I gave Mama all 3. And she put her arm around me, and then she said, "Come on in and play with the children." So she opened the door, and 2 of my best friends to this day, one is deceased, Donald, were standing there to greet me. James Hall, who was my friend down in Macon, Georgia, and Donald Cross. And that was a very profound beginning for me when I was having a traumatic experience of separation anxiety. I had someone who saw me and engaged me with a sense of compassion. As I continued to grow, my next door neighbor would become the other person who is an ancestor and who I am aware is with me every day, every moment. Referred to as her as Mawelchu. And Mawelchu was the goddess of my block. So we would, whenever we needed inspiration or just even conversations, even though she wouldn't talk much because I was a little boy, she was an elder when I came along. We would just go talk with Mawelchu, or she would take myself and the Mumford girls around the corner to the store to buy us ice cream, cookies, candy, whatever we may want it as children. And as I grew, Mawelchu became for me the person that I knew if I needed to feel my authentic self, that I could go to her and not be judged. I don't know how I knew that. It was more intuitive. And so I would go and I would sit on the porch, and sometimes we wouldn't talk. And she was the first person, the only person that gave me a nickname. I was her champion, and she was just tremendous impact. So these 2 persons were spiritually and emotionally inspirational in my early formation as a person.
It sounds like the reason you recall those stories, and I've heard those stories, I think they're wonderful stories, is that you realize how much people need to be seen and to be heard, and so many people get lost because there's no one really seeing them and speaking to them.
Yeah.
I know that from my experience working at the jail and teaching the healthy haiku and meditation and just kind of being there for them, there were folks who you could tell were just kind of love-starved, needing to be touched, needing to be seen. And I don't mean touch physically, but I mean to be seen more so than anything, and to be validated.
Right.
Yeah.
That is true. And the other element of just recalling those stories so early on, and several others, because the one with Ms. Venheim in particular, was a trauma experience. And what happens to us when we have traumatic experiences, the brain takes snapshot pictures of the emotion. And then the emotion and the event come together and it burns in our brains and we never forget it. And so as I tell the story, it is almost as it was yesterday when I had the experience. So those were two very, very important persons in my life, and my wheelchair on for me on into adolescent. Yeah.
So I know we're going to use the piece that you wrote about Ahmad Arbury to talk about your work. So let's just jump into that, because we never have enough time, and this is going to be one of those shows where we don't have enough time to really go as deep as we want to. But tell us about the piece, I Am Ahmad Arbury, and maybe you might want to just read a little bit of it, and then the audience will hear your passion about what happened when Ahmad Arbury was murdered, as well as some other people, some other African Americans right around then. And so the whole show really is dedicated to psychotherapy with African Americans. So
I'd be happy to do that. But I need to back up before I go into that portion.
Okay.
I didn't start out to be a therapist. I started out in ministry at the age of 23, and my vision was to pastor. So I pastored a church, CME churches for 16 years. And so it was not my conscious intent to enter into the ministry of psychotherapy, marriage and family therapy. After several years, after I went to Desert Shield, Desert Storm, I came back as a chaplain, and during that experience, soldiers just talked to me, and I was clear that I wanted to work on a doctorate in pastoral care and counseling. So that happened, and Mrs. Cole said to me, she said, Reverend KYNES, this is 1992. She says, Black people don't do therapy, so you're going to have to keep a church. And I just said, thank you, Ms. Cole. Bless her. And when I started training, the white folk in the training program saw my clinical skills, and they said, you could do this full time. And so something, I heard that, but I wasn't thinking about that because I was only thinking about trying to heal myself. And I was looking for a way to do that. And so I got into therapy myself in 1992 and continued to this day. But back then, it was part of the training to become a therapist, but I still did not plan to become a therapist. I just started developing practice, and it grew. So that's kind of the foundation in terms, even before getting to this piece, because and so I stopped pastoring in 96, and by 2000 I had a full-time practice. So to get more now into what I do as a therapist, I want to read from the paper that just a couple of paragraphs to give you what I wrote in 2020. This article, by the way, was published in the Lutheran Church Journal, and was the lead article back in 2021. So, as a mental and spiritual health professional who provides psychotherapy daily for individuals from diverse populations, I listen to and hear the depth of pain and suffering my clients experience on a daily basis. Their pain and suffering are connected with trauma experiences from their personal narrative, both historical and in the present moment. The recent social traumatic events in our country simply amplifies the individualized spoken and unspoken suffering in the clinical environment. A safe place to talk and to be heard and understood with compassion and empathy. As an African American and Black man, not only do these modern day lynching and killing stimulate the existential anxieties about living today in a society and a community where the covert and overt message is implied, you don't count. Your life is of no intrinsic worth and value. It also stimulates psychological traumas of the narrative that resides in us, in the unconscious or subconscious of all people of color in this country. So we're working to come up for some fresh air and breathe.
Thank you. I want you to go to what you skipped, though, because that's so important.
Oh.
You know, when we think back in history, we don't realize the timing of certain, basically, assassinations that took place and how they all collectively affected us. So you could start with we tragically.
Go ahead, you read.
Sure.
Okay.
We tragically and traumatically lost Mr. Ahmad Arbury on Sunday, February 23rd of this year, back in 2020. The police shooting death of Breonna Taylor on March 13th. Then
May 25th.
Then on May 25th, the officer Chauvin, who knelt on Mr. George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I can't breathe. On May 27th, Tony McDade, a 38-year-old transgender man, was fatally shot and killed by a police shooting. And on June 12th in Atlanta, Rayshard Brooks was shot and killed by another police officer. Not surprising, we're just now seeing the video of the brutal and senseless killing of Ahmad. So all of these things took place kind of back to back, within a 2-month period or so. And so the trauma of it all just, escalated.
Yes, and continues, as we know, to this very day.
Oh, absolutely. The Michael Jackson impersonator, Mr. Neely,
yes,
who was killed in New York City by an ex-Marine who thought he was doing a good thing, supposedly.
Right.
And he was set free after being arrested. They've been having protests in New York City. There's a lot of stuff going on. I think around the country they're having protests about that.
I'm hot, so y'all have to pardon me because I will wipe this joyful sweat off my forehead. Yeah, that piece that was inspiring for me for several reasons that we can get to further in the essay. Mm-hmm. But part of my work on a daily basis has to do with people who come in with not necessarily traumas to that extreme, mm-hmm. but traumas nonetheless. And not everyone comes in, I don't want to imply everybody has been traumatized.
Right.
Because the therapy place is a place where most people come to grow. And they're not coming to be, quote unquote, fixed, but they come to gain a deeper sense of who they are. There's this question of who am I? I enjoy working. I have seven groups as well as seeing individuals, couples, but I have 7 groups, and I enjoy working with all of them. I have 3 all-women group, 2 all-men group. All of those are African American. I have 1 diverse mixed group, men, women, black, white, and a clergy group. And each brings something different to the room, but the theme remains the same. That is, who am I? That becomes the elemental question that they're always asking. And that question can be answered the more and more that they explore their personal narratives and story. When I wrote this, the men group in particular were experiencing probably the most visible trauma experience. And for example, these Black men who are highly professionals, all different type of work background, they're married, education on all levels, and I especially saw them troubled the ones who work primarily like in corporate America, especially when it came around to evaluation time. They talk about those experiences of having to prove themselves in a way that others may not have to try to do. My work involves being with people from all various professions and vocations, ages. Well, I don't work with children anymore. I did work with children several years ago. And the groups are very powerful in the sense that they provide a safe space where there would be kind of kindred spirits, kind of in terms of conversation, common language, that in the therapy room, you can't probably have the same conversation outside. It's confidential. You can risk being vulnerable and feel secure at the same time. And so my role in all of that is I'm not there to fix anyone or tell them what to do, or basically just to hold space as they discover what their hearts wants to bring forth for their self-manifestation.
So I want to back up a little bit because there's so many different angles to this topic. And the one that hits me right off is that so many African Americans do not want to go to therapy. They say, oh, that's for white folks, or that's for crazy people, or, something like that. But they just, can't do that. Therapy, I'm not going to therapy. I don't need therapy. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. So how do you find, is that changing in terms of our community, and in what way is it changing? What ways, how are your clients, are they more receptive to, or once they get there, they realize this is a safe space and I really needed to be here a long time ago?
Well, that's an excellent question. And I thank you for asking that, because when I first started in 1992, there were not many, at least I was not seeing many African Americans, a few. And the way our training was structured was that we were doing the academic work, we were doing that's academic clinical, doctoral level work, we were doing theological work on that level. And then they gave us clients the first day we entered into the program. Oh, wow. So we was doing clinical work. Then we had to have our own clinical supervision. We had to be in our own therapy. They didn't require it, but they strongly recommended it. Right. I was in 2 group therapies. And so there were not many African Americans come around. And in fact, I was the only one in the doctoral program when I entered that year in 92. Wow. And I was very alone. So as I progressed, more and more African Americans my age and younger began to come. But when I had a full practice around 1998, once I got licensed, and so when I say we in this context, we as African Americans was using insurance to come. Okay. And so my practice began to grow, and I had probably 90%, 80 to 90% of African Americans. And so what Mrs. Cole said to me didn't fit. And
so were people, sorry to interrupt, were a lot of people coming by word of mouth? How did you grow?
Yeah, I've always tried to figure that out, because I was not marketing.
You weren't marketing.
I was not marketing. I was not. I don't know. That's a mystery to me. But it kept coming. I think word of mouth. Yeah. And I remember one professional came. This is like in 2004, and some word of mouth referred her to me, and And I was full, and I said, I can't see you. I have room, but I can refer you to a resident.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, no. They told me you, and I don't care what time that you can get me in, I will be there.
Well, yeah, she was kind of forceful.
Yeah.
But you accommodated her, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. And found out why she wanted to come. And she worked for about 12 years. And and I understood, why she wanted to come.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I've experienced is my clients would tell others about the process of the experience, and they're oftentimes surprised when other people discover that they're going to therapy. I tell them not to share with them what they talk about, but if they want to share. So I think that it is a change, has changed, and it will continue to change. Now, there's not that stigma when early on, when we got the message early on, you don't tell other people your business.
And you don't take family business outside, or
That's right. And then we weren't trusting. That were not many Black therapists back in the day. So we definitely was not going to trust others with our personal family stories. Right. That was left for Black preachers, and that became not such a safe environment, because sometimes you would go have a session with the preacher, and then they would get up sometimes and blast part of it in the sermon from the pulpit. So, and then the other myths that nothing is wrong with me. Nothing is wrong with all of us. People who come because they want to. And when I say none of us, I mean there are extremes. I'm not talking about the extreme cases. But nonetheless, most of the people that I see come because they want to be there. They make an investment in their mental health, and especially in today's climate and society where there's so much stress and anxiety, it's a place to just simply breathe and be seen and be listened to. So it is increasing, and I got a place on later where I just simply say, and it's going to continue to increase. They even have some AI. I don't want to call them dummies, but who have attempted to do therapy.
Robots
doing therapy. Thank you.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. That's not good. Because the one thing about robots is that they don't have the emotional element. Although they're saying that robots are learning that. So we need to be careful because they're learning how to be emotional. I actually went on an AI platform, and I was talking specifically about racial and ethnic health disparities. And so I was having this conversation. I said, so what do you think it will take to end health disparities by race and ethnicity? And the AI robot replied, well, kind of like, I'm just a robot and I'm not supposed to have an opinion. But if I had one, this is what needs to happen. And they talked about social determinants of health. And I mean, there's so many things. It was as if I had written it. Remember, we had Beverly on Dr. Bev on talking about AI and how it's working. And the answer was kind of scary. I'm like, okay, you have no opinion, but you've just given me 3 pages of what you would recommend if you were allowed to recommend something. So, that's kind of, sorry, I didn't mean to take us off.
No, that's fine.
But the whole AI thing is just amazing to me. So, I think the piece about what's happening with children. I mean, because remember I was talking about Healthy Haiku and the fact that I was really concerned with the children in our community, and that I had started out doing workshops with children. And then I realized I needed to work with the adults because they needed the health and wellness information, as well as the fun time, playtime that we have in the Healthy Haiku workshops. So,
well, that's a good question, because today in one of the groups, the mother asked me if I knew of a child therapist. Children of today will need therapy early.
Absolutely.
And they would need play therapy or art therapy because they can't deal with the pressure of talk therapy.
Right.
So if you know family members, your own child experiencing anxiety, nightmares, you can contact me and I can put you in touch with someone who does play therapy and art therapy. I had a mother today whose 9-year-old daughter said to her, Mom, I keep hearing these voices and they're telling me I'm too big or I'm not pretty. And her daughter, whom I met, is a very attractive little girl, intelligent, articulate. But the issue with the children today has to do with all of the social media outlet that provides them with both positive and negative feedback. Girls, adolescent girls in the African American community are committing one of the highest levels of suicide than any other group. And that was never, ever the case. But it feeds they're looking for not only attention, but self-esteem feedback. If they don't receive it, then they look down on themselves with self-judgment and move into a place of self-loathing. And so the work with children is essential. I enjoyed it when I was able to do it. I had sand trays and I would watch them create their stories. I had a 9-year-old once who found his father dead on the kitchen floor. But when he drew, interestingly, he drew the Twin Towers and the plane going into the Twin Towers back there then. So after 9/11. So our children hold a lot and they really need to be heard and listened to. As Ma Welcher was my therapist, she was my all in all back there. And then because Mama was too busy, she was not emotionally available. I had one of my other clients who working in a particular school who noticed offering compassion to a little girl, and the girl said, "No one ever sees me and talks kind to me like you do." And she said it broke her heart. So it's very essential. The work that you're doing with Maurice and the children is therapeutic in its own way because you're providing a model and you're offering them back, feedback with grace that they may not experience otherwise at times, but you help planting a seed that may blossom 10 years from now. So the work with children is essential. And,
so very important. So very, very important. I was just looking to see if we had any comments. I didn't see any. Feel free to post any comments or questions that you might have. We do. Let's see.
Oh, she said, "Don't forget to mess up."
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, as we're waiting for folks to enter their questions, we're going to do a small clip that we've shown many times. Why don't you say a little bit about?
Well, thank you, Dan. I want to add this just before we do that. This is the essence of I think what I do, and you'll see a piece of it in Master of Light. But one of my persons that inspired me is Howard Thurman. In I think it was 19. It was this. Howard Thurman was the keynote baccalaureate speaker at Spelman. And I'm trying to find out. I think it was
It's okay. Go.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I'll find it and let you know. But he had this address entitled "The Sound of the Genuine," and these short sentences kind of give the essence of what happens in the space where counseling, therapy is, consultation, coaching, whichever word works, takes place. He writes this: "There's in every person something that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in herself. There is in you something that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in yourself. Nobody like you has ever been born, and no one like you will ever be born again. You are the only one. And if you miss the sound of the genuine in you, you will be a cripple all the rest of your life, because you will never be able to get a sense on who you are."
The sound of the genuine. I love that.
And he adds this: "There is something in every one of you that waits, listens for the genuine in yourself. And if you cannot hear it, you will never find whatever it is for which you are searching. And if you hear it and then do not follow it, it was better that you had never been born. You are the only you that has ever lived. Your idioms is the only idioms of its kind in all of existence. And if you cannot hear the sound of the genuine in you, you will all your life spend your days on the ends of strings that somebody else pulls. Therefore, cultivate the discipline of listening to the sound of the genuine in yourself."
I like that.
Yeah, it's very powerful.
So that's one of the things that you're motivated to do, is to help people find their genuine selves.
Yeah.
And not get lost in all of the, I think Dr. Mark calls it worries of the world.
Yes.
It's so easy to get caught up in the worries of the world and lose yourself.
Yeah, so with that, Janet, so this is what's happening in the clip that you're about to see, as this person is looking and discovering the sound of the genuine in himself.
Eagles versus pigeons, which one would you rather be?
He said I want to be an eagle.
Why?
Because they fly higher than pigeons.
And what does that allow them to do?
See more.
Who are you?
So much of who I am today is my experience growing up in my hometown of Kansas City.
My mother had me at 15.
All I wanted was somebody to love me. What have I done that's so bad that you can't forgive?
Mama set me up to go to prison instead of her. When the judge sentenced me to 11 years, I said, I'll show you. I think about the system that failed her. I am not what has happened to me.
Your story, your experiences, your being seen. It's no accident.
Well, I kind of always escape through art. If I just took the next step, the world would open up before me. Share this inner light within you. I am not what has happened to me. I am what I choose to become.
such a powerful, powerful documentary movie. And if you haven't seen it, I highly encourage. Every time I see it, I glean something different from it. A story of survival, a story of love and compassion and forgiveness. So many things that we're all dealing with in our homes, in our families, in our communities. Love, forgiveness, creativity. There's so much in that piece. I have a good friend who called and she said she saw it for the first time about 2 weeks ago. She said, and I sent it to all my family members, and it's so powerful. It's so amazing. Everybody needs to see that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Bernetta was just singing the praises of the movie and your praises as well. I know that they don't say this, but a lot of the storyline followed the counseling that you provided to this young man.
Yeah.
And that also adds to the meaningfulness and the power of that story.
Yeah, and the movement toward self-forgiveness and self-acceptance and reconciliation by means of talking about the experience. You asked a question earlier about I don't need that, and one of the experiences of just talking about experiences that we've had in life. I had a client today, was his second visit, a middle-aged Black man who said that he had been promising himself and his wife that for years he's going to come. And so we initially started out saying that we would meet every other week. And he came today and he said, I've been thinking, I enjoyed my experience. 2 weeks ago, he said, 2 weeks is too long.
Too long. There's so much to work on now.
And he says, I'm aware of how I respond sometimes to our children. And he sat there and we did some work. And we got quiet. There was meditative moments, and so that he could began to hear the genuine in himself. And the more we hear the genuine in ourselves, which is, by the way, it is a lifelong journey. You see, the journey, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, the journey is the destination. So there's no arrival point where we can say, I have arrived.
There.
We'll continue to evolve. We're continuing to grow. We'll continue to discover more and more of who we are. And each experience in our lives shifts us in degrees unknown. And if we fail to explore those with interest, with mystery, with awe, with curiosity, with imagination, we miss more of learning about who we are and appreciation for the whole of ourselves, and so I sit with people with delight and to watch them discover more and more of themselves. It could take a year. I remember when I was in training, one of our supervisors said that it takes a minimum of 5 years to really get into the depth of oneself, because we have so many defense mechanisms that we have to work through. Howard Thurman refers to that as I must work through these images that have been planted in my brain. Now, that other techniques that says it doesn't take that long, but for people who want to grow in depth, the depth of the soul, there's no end to it. There's just more that comes to surface. And by the way, that piece that I was reading from Howard Thurman was published in the University of Indianapolis library, but you can get it online. It's called Crossing Reflections. Crossings Reflections, number 4. The Sound of the Genuine. Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman, May 4th, 1980. May 4th, 1980, at Spelman College here in Atlanta. You start to say.
I have 10 things going on at the same time. But the one thought that I had to do with the reason for going deep with people and helping them to find their uniqueness, and their voice and who they are, is to empower them to step into their power and do what it is they're supposed to be doing here. I used to do this meditation at the jail, and it would kind of take them, to an ocean. They're sitting there, and this they see this being coming down the ocean towards them, and then it's an older person who comes to them, shakes their hand, and sits with them, and whispers something in their ear. And what they're whispering is about who they really are and what their purpose is. This is why you came here, and they have a little bit of discussion, but not a lot. The point of it is that elder who comes towards them is just there to remind them, you may be sitting in jail, but this is temporary. Somehow you got off your path. We need to get you back on your path so that you can contribute to the world. Everyone's here for a reason. There are no accidents. If you're here, you're supposed to be here. And you have a specific thing that you're supposed to contribute or do on this earth for our short time while we're here. And so many people are just kind of living day to day, collecting a paycheck or not, and just dealing with the worries of the world, as opposed to really being on their path and making a contribution in life. So one of the things that you're doing that's so important is helping people to discover their uniqueness and get back on their path so that they can, make their contribution and do what it is they're supposed to be doing while they're here.
Yeah, and that has come with me having to delve into my own stories of my own understanding of myself. I was adopted. I was given up within a family. It was a family arranged adoption. As I grew up, I knew that the persons who were rearing me were not my actual parents. They were too old. And so I was a secret. And I found the letters that predate my birth as they were making the arrangements that I would be taken care of. So it was done in love, but it still had its own impact. And as I began to get older, I became more curious about, who am I really in the context of my family and my family of origin? And I got on this pursuit to uncover my story, and I knew where my mother was. It was the family, but I found my father. And from 1986 to 2014 was the first time I heard him refer to me as his son. And that was I was sitting at his table. I remember he went and placed the finest linen on the table and the fine china for us to eat catfish and grits, And I felt like a kid. This is like in 2014, and in 2017 we had reconciled. He didn't see me until I was 30 for the first time. It was the first time I saw my biological father. And it was just amazing. And the first thing he gave me one year was a bag of peanuts. And I remember thinking, wow, my dad gave me a bag of peanuts. And I relish eating those peanuts one by one. Yeah, it's a beautiful story.
Well, the whole thing of being connected and having gaps in your life that are painful or not clear to you. And that, I mean, some people never have the opportunity to connect like that, but there are other things that they need to connect within themselves to empower them.
Yeah.
So the work that you do is so very valuable. And
thank you.
And most people, if most people need to be heard, to be seen, and to encourage to step into their power.
Yes.
And not be pulled down by doubt and anger and sadness and mistakes of the past. It's like, how do you clear up all that stuff? And one of the things I teach is ho'oponopono. I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. And thank you. And the reason for saying those things to yourself is to clear out and clean out all the negativity. It's the ancient Hawaiian practice that they use for conflict resolution and building themselves up, the ho'oponopono. I would spell it, and I don't want to get in trouble or get Janet in trouble, but it's HO apostrophe Ho'oponopono. So anyway, that's just something that I taught that at the jail also, and people throughout the jail, the detainees as well as the staff and the detention officers would come up to me and they said, "I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me." And what's the last thing? What's the last thing? I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me and thank you. And so spreading the love and the joy.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, we're close to time, and I promised Janet last week that I would say something about unconditional compassion. That's a story. I'll tell you the story right quick, and we'll say goodnight. When I returned from China back in 2014, I picked up some herbs, and so I wanted to test them out before, but I was going to take them. The doctor there told me I need to work on my kidneys. So I found a Chinese medical center here in Atlanta, and I told the doc that I just came back from Beijing and Hong Kong, and he was so glad. And Dr. Lee and I became friends instantly. And he did the same meridian test on my wrist and told me the same thing. I said, "Wow, that doc was telling the truth," and I became a believer. Mm-hmm. So Dr. Lee asked me, he said, within 30 minutes, he says, "James, you love people and you help them." And so I said, "Dr. Lee, I don't know how to help." And then a voice says, "Bernard, shut up and receive it." Right. So I did. And he says, "You must now provide unconditional compassion to yourself." And he said, "On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rank yourself in providing unconditional compassion for yourself?" And I'd never heard that. I thought he was going to say unconditional love. And I came up with the number in my head. And so it took me a few years to really wrap that concept around and understand it from my heart. So unconditional compassion for oneself really involves a few things, and they are, in brief: elimination of self-judgment, a movement toward self-acceptance, the conscious offering of grace and self-forgiveness to the self, the offering of affection, kindness, and tenderness to the self, and the expression of gratitude to oneself simply for being who you are. This is unconditional compassion. This is what I work to offer on a daily basis.
And you do
Thank
a really good job of it.
Thank you, my dear.
You're so welcome. I've learned so much this evening, and then I also had things reinforced. We hope that you all have enjoyed this episode. Certainly connect with Bernard we had a list up there. Sankofa card is one place where you can see details about him and his practice. Email. Got a couple of emails. So which one is that? Bernard KYNES at sankofainstitute.info.
Yeah.
For consultation, tell them your site.
Yeah, my whole name is James Bernard KYNES Sr. with the 2SR.com. And again, the digital card. But you can go on the site, jamesbernardkynesSenior.com, and you can get to me there.
Make sure there's 2 S's at
Yes.
the end. I think that's going to do it for this evening.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome so
This was
much.
good. And we will see you all next week. We'll have a surprise guest. And remember to like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And folks are also following on LinkedIn. So we appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for watching us either live or as a recording. We're happy to be with you, even if it's for a short time on Tuesday evenings or whenever, for an hour. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right.
Ashe.